I will go ahead and get started in the interest of time because I have a lot of really great information for you today. I will probably have some more people rolling in as the minutes go on. But I wanted to welcome you here, and I really appreciate you spending your time with me this afternoon. My name is Becca Shelton, if we have not met yet, and I'm a career advisor here at the University of Richmond. I work with our career advising team, and in fact, I am the one person that works with all of our alumni, and I've got some information for you all and a little bit about access to career services. So I work with all of our alumni as well as our SPCS students, current and alumni, and our MBA students, current and graduates of the program. And I provide career support in terms of one-on-one appointments and programming like this and other things within the career services realm. So today we are here talking about looking for a job in a tough economy, and absolutely nobody expected the pandemic to come 6 months ago or whenever that was, and nobody absolutely expected the economic fallout that has happened from it, and the fallout that many people, maybe you, are still feeling today. So my goal this afternoon is for you to leave my webinar with some practical advice for your job search. So before we dive into the content, a few things that I just wanted you to note from the webinar today. If you have questions at any point, go ahead and use that Q&A feature down there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can just click on that and write your question. You should be able to submit anonymously if you want to. That's usually enabled for us. And the Q&A button is going to help me to more efficiently manage the questions that come in. In terms of that, I will have I think I'll have 3 slides in the beginning, a few slides, 3 or 4, and then we'll take a pause for questions, and then I'll have a couple more to finish it out. And then I always try to leave time at the end for questions. I try really hard to wrap things up in an hour for you because I know that time is precious. But if we end up going a few minutes over, but if you need to leave, you know, at 3 o'clock, then just go ahead and sign off. Typically what I do after my webinars is I will send out a link to where the recording will be, because it usually takes a few days to get it up there. I usually send out my slides too to those of you who attend, so you can have that for reference. So there should be some good material in there for you. But without further ado, we will go ahead and dive in. So wanted to talk a little bit overview what we'll talk about today. I've sort of broken this up into a few categories, if you will. So talking about reimagining your search, oftentimes in a tough economy when things are in a recession, you might have to get a little creative or flexible with what you're looking for. So we'll talk about that. Getting organized, refreshing yourself in your job search, which is really important, and staying motivated throughout your job search. Before we really dive into content, what I will say that I'll probably share bits and pieces of my own personal story throughout our session today. Before I signed on full-time at University of Richmond, I've been here for just over 2 years. I celebrated 2 years in July. Before that, I was in a really active job search for 10 months. And so, you know, I'm not sure who you all are in this process, if this is a new job search, if you've been at it a while, you know, or maybe you're knowing that you're anticipating a job search coming up and you're just trying to get ready for it. But wherever you are in that process, I completely understand what it's like to be in an active job search. And so I'll probably share bits and pieces of my story as well, but just know that there is somebody else that has been in your boat. So before we dive into the job search content that I have for you today, I wanted to, especially if you're new to career services, if you're a current student, you've probably heard about us in some capacity. We are pretty widespread on campus. But if you are an alumni that is joining us today, maybe this is your first experience with career services. So I wanted to give you an overview of what you have available to you. So the bulk of the work that I do with my populations is through one-on-one career advising. And as you can see there are a lot of topics that we can cover. Most of my research in the areas that I work with people most in are things that affect experienced job searchers. So things like job search strategy, which we'll be talking about some today. We can do cover letters and resume reviews, talking about building your network. For those that are career switching, or if you're looking for a promotion, you're trying to advance in your field, that's certainly something that you and I can talk about together. And I also do mock interviews, which is really great. So if you're feeling a little rusty, especially with the job search underway, reach out and we can do those together. Over there on the right, there are some resources that you have available. If you're wondering what in the world Spider Connect is, that is our system that we use to manage several things in career services. And one of those is our appointment scheduling system. So I am more than happy and would love to chat with you all after this as a follow-up to discuss your particular situations that you might be working with. But I do prefer that you use Spider Connect. So again, if you don't know what that is, that's a new term, or you're not sure how to access it, just shoot me an email and I'll have my email at the end of the presentation and I can give you directions for how to get on board with that. And also over there on the right, to the far right, you will see all of the presentations, the webinars that I do are available in perpetuity. So forever and ever, amen. I am out there on the Alumni Relations YouTube page. And so you can catch all of the ones that I've done. I did frequent webinars throughout this spring and summer. So they're all there that you can see as well. So now let's dive into our content. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was some ways in which you can reimagine your job search. One of the things that's really frustrating about this is that we really can't control the past, and there's a good amount of the future that is really hard for us to control. That is a difficult feeling in a job search to grasp, but I think what's most important to pull from that is that what we can control is what we do today and in the days ahead. So making a plan for yourself, and that's one of my goals for you today, is to have you leave this presentation feeling more empowered and let you have more tools and resources to be able to take control of the things that you can take control of in your job search, because that's really important for our psyche. And mental health and psyche is half of your battle with this job search. So one of the things that you might want to think about, and this is totally dependent on where you are and what situation you're in. Some people have a little bit of flexibility to change what they're going to pursue, right? And again, that's very individual, and I'm happy to talk to you all one-on-one about that. But trying to remember where we are right now in the US with our economic situation. This recession is very different from the Great Recession that happened about a little over 10 years ago. What was funny was that was actually, I started in career services in 2009. So everything had really hit the fan when I started. And it's interesting because the Great Recession was fueled by the housing industry. So many things around that were affected severely. The construction business, I had several friends that were in that business it was just really, really tough for them. This recession that we're in, the epicenter really is the service industry. And what's interesting is that the service industry makes up a large percentage of the overall jobs in America. So it's affected so many people. Those places are starting to open back up, even if they look a little bit different. And so people that were furloughed, they have openings now. Maybe they brought them back. Maybe those people that were furloughed found something else in the meantime. And so there are some positions that are starting to open back up. And when you are considering being flexible with what you're pursuing, look for industries that are hiring right now. So where is there a need in our economy, and where can you fill that at least temporarily to maybe get yourself by, or just sort of as an interim plan until you get something that you're really interested in. Thinking about, do you need a different entry point back into the workforce? Or if you are a senior graduating, I know we have several seniors that signed up for today, or if you're a class of 2020, and you're looking for that entry point into the industry or industries you're interested in, do you maybe need to seek sort of an adjacent role, something a little bit alternative than what you had it planned on pursuing, but something that will still give you the skills and abilities that you need to eventually get to where you want to go? Because there are many paths to where people want to get in the future with their careers and their jobs. And so picking a path that will get you there, that's a little bit easier than maybe another one. The other thing that I always talk about with job search is really diversifying your toolbox, your job search toolbox. That's how I like to think of it, because you have lots of different things in there. And if you look at a toolbox, you think, well, every tool in there has its own purpose, right? You don't use a hammer to fix everything. Or maybe you do, or maybe you are like people I've known before that use duct tape to fix everything, and that's fine. But every tool in your job searching toolbox has a different purpose, and they all work together to get to the same goal, to fix it, to find a job, right? So I always recommend that people use online applications and networking and informational interviews. If you're interested in learning more about networking, especially in today's world where it's virtual, we can't really gather in large groups. Next week, I am having a networking info session, and you can look on the calendar of events for that and sign up for it. Re-examining your transferable skills, maybe like we talked about earlier, maybe pivoting to sort of an adjacent position that is similar to what you wanted to do, but still gives you the skills and abilities. Remember that you are in this for the long game. I think probably most of you on this call have a good amount of working years left in your life, and certainly the next position that you find will not be the end of the road for you. So you have a long time to build your skills and to build your career. And remember that this is just a step on that journey. So the next little bit of information that I wanted to cover was talking about getting organized and really just being more intentional with your job search. I remember early on in my job search, my 10-month job search a few years ago, there were many days where I, in the beginning, sort of felt I was floundering, or I was doing all of this stuff and it really wasn't leading anywhere. And so really when I took a step back from that, the seeming confusion in my head, when I took a step back from that and really tried to organize myself better and organize my tasks better, that's when I felt much more in control of things. And that's when I felt like I knew what I was doing, instead of just staring at my laptop for 8 hours a day and hoping that something would happen, right? So a few tips and tricks here. Start with tracking your job applications and your networking contacts. If you haven't done this already, I highly recommend that you start it. And if you are already doing this practice, maybe taking a refreshed look at it. Do you need to reorganize things? Do you need to move some job applications off of that list to another list that are no longer active? The whole goal with this is just to be purposeful in whatever speaks to you. If you are a spreadsheet nerd, like I think I have a little inner spreadsheet nerd in myself, and that might speak to you more than a notebook. Some people like to take it old school and do pen and paper, and that's totally fine. But whatever works for you to keep track of this information is going to be the most important thing. Things that you're going to want to think about here. And I have a template that I can send out to you afterwards with the slides of something that I use that was helpful for me. But with the job applications, you're going to want to track things like the date you applied, the title, the company name, any kind of requisition or position number that was associated with that role, because you're going to want to reference that when you follow up with the job. Let's see, you're going to want to track any kind of follow-up that you did with that job posting, the contact information for that posting as well. So you just have an easy reference there, and also have a place for notes. So if the recruiter told you anything, when they expect to start interviews or whatnot, would be important to track. With the networking contacts, it's sort of the same thing. Who is it? Maybe where they work. When you spoke with them, any kind of advice or information or notes that they gave you there, that would be important to track as well. Using your desktop folders to track documents was really, really important. I have had more than one people before tell me, when I ask them how they're organized, they say, well, I just, have them sorted in my email folders. And I usually ask them how that's working for them, and they kind of are a little bit shy and say, well, not so much. So really being intentional about how you organize your documents, because really for your jobs, especially when you're doing cover letters, you're going to have a different cover letter for every job that you apply for. If you have a templated cover letter, you really should be rethinking that and making that more specific to the job. So you're going to have a lot of documents to keep track of. So however that works for you, and also consider being portable with that. Putting it on some kind of cloud service would be pretty important. So make sure that no matter where you are, if you decide to get out of the house, maybe go to a park or, go to another space in which you can work, that would be really important to have that stuff there. Set weekly goals for yourself and just be really intentional with those. Remember that these are baby steps. And we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting in a little bit, but with your weekly goals, this was really important for me and keep feeling like I had control over things when I was in a job search. I would start off every Monday morning after I had my coffee, of course. I would start off every Monday morning writing down what I had planned to do for that week. So, whether that is you want to revisit your resume, maybe you want to read up on cover letters and make sure that you're feeling good about writing those. Maybe you're going to do something with LinkedIn, right? But it's important to make sure that you have weekly goals set for yourself so you can be really intentional with them. Write them down or put them on a sticky note on your computer or something. And so it's in a place where it's prominent for you to see, and it's a lot less tempting for you to let yourself off the hook with that. Making sure that you give yourself some space here. Number 4, cutting it off at 5 o'clock is really, really important, especially if you have, friends or family around in your household or in your general vicinity. It is really important that you cut this off at a certain time, maybe at 6 o'clock or whatever, but whatever works for you. Just not spending all hours of the day on it, because you do need to step back and have, don't forget who you are in this job search process. The last thing I have here is just remembering that in this particular recession we're in, because things were hit so quickly and drastically and unexpectedly, many organizations are still really not sure about their capacity to hire. And so places that you might be applying to or looking for jobs at, I've heard a lot of in the last few months about people who have applied for jobs, but perhaps maybe the hiring process was cut short and they actually stopped interviewing or didn't interview for that because maybe their budget fell through. So they really didn't have the capacity to hire, or maybe they just weren't really sure if they could take it on, and maybe their business and capacity to do that would be, maybe they weren't sure about how it would look in the next few months because of the way the economy is changing. So just be really understanding and compassionate to the recruiters that, they oftentimes don't have control over what happens with that hiring process. The decision to stop hire in the middle of it is above their heads usually. So just being understanding that might happen, and just remembering that even in that, if that happens to you, you get, a job application is pulled away. If that does happen, just following up and being really understanding and just communicating clearly and openly with that recruiter is really important. Okay, so after this slide, I have time for questions. So if you guys are thinking about questions, if you have them rolling around in your head, you can throw them in the Q&A box and we will get to them in just a few. But this is something that I really love. I love this idea. I started doing it about halfway through my job search because the first part was me trying to just, get reestablished and get into that mode. But when you are thinking about staying motivated and staying supported, this is not a lone adventure for you. So I always encourage people to think about developing yourself a personal advisory board. This is what I call it. You can call it whatever you want to. And oftentimes they come from your circle of contacts you already know, but certainly they can include people that you could be introduced to that you might not know right now. But really, this is a group of people within your network or outside of it that have specific and diverse skills that you admire. So some of these could be aspirational, professionals that are aspirational for you. Maybe you want to be in their role one day. And they are people that can help you with career problems or making big decisions or helping you make decisions about job searches. Just like a company has an advisory board that helps them manage things, these people could be that for you. And it could be a lot of different type of people in your life. And some people, they serve different purposes for you. And that's absolutely perfect and great. So some of those people could be those that provide constructive feedback or advice for you. Maybe that's not really the, constructive feedback or constructive criticism is not always fun to hear, but it is really, really important. And it's really good for growth. People that are influencers, so maybe they can introduce you to people that would be really good for you to know. Those were some of the first people when I started job searching that I reached out to, because one of the first things that I realized that would really need to happen for me was some informational interviews and some networking contacts that I didn't already know. I needed to know the directors in my industry, and I needed to know the VPs, right? Those were the people that were going to give me information and insight into what could be helpful for me. And ultimately, one of the informational interviews that I had from a contact that was given to me by one of my personal contacts ended up how I, in a sort of a roundabout way, but I ended up getting the job at University of Richmond. So they can be really helpful. Some people that might just simply be your cheerleaders, and you need that in your life, though. Especially now, you really need people to say, you know what, you are doing a wonderful job, and they're just cheering you on and making sure that you stay on top of stuff and stay motivated. Some of these people on your advisory board could be aspirational, like I said, some of your career role models. They can really help give you advice, because usually those people are seasoned and they've been around the block a few times, and they can help give you some feedback and advice on, how can you get to where you want to go. So consider diversifying the people on this board with expertise and years of experiences. They could be a lot of people, like I said, in your life. It could also turn out to be potential mentors. And starting with who you know and then asking for introductions is really good. This does not happen overnight. So just remember to be patient as you start to build the people that would be here for you. And make sure that, like any other networking contact, you would keep in touch regularly and make this a mutual relationship. Excuse me. I am happy to talk with you all individually, like I said, about like this or anything else that we've talked about. But I will go ahead and pause for questions. So if you all are thinking about anything, go ahead, like I said, pop them in that Q&A box, and I'll give you guys just a few seconds to do that. Okay, so it looks like right now we don't have any, which is great. That's fine. I think you might have some more down the road. So I've got a few more slides that I will share with you. And then, like I said, we will have it open up for questions. So the next part that I wanted to talk about here was just refreshing. Like I said in the beginning, sometimes it's really important with your job search to take a step back. No matter where if you're a student, if you're an alumni, in the middle of a job search, you've got a lot of other things in your life going on. And just taking a moment, maybe a day or so, to step back and sort of refresh things for yourself. So maybe doing a little brainstorming, writing about, what have you done so far and what are you doing now? Are there things that you've noticed over time with your job search that are working better than others? Maybe there are some websites that you use that are more helpful, certain practices that are more helpful than others, or noting things that are maybe not necessarily as helpful. And, sometimes when you do this, I remember when I did this, when I took stock of things, I realized there were some things that I was spending a lot of time on that were just not that fruitful. So I decided to just reframe and redo the way that I did those. And that was really helpful for me, because it sort of felt like I was spinning my wheels. This next one I think is really, really important. So I will say that ultimately, of course, the goal is to get a job, right? that would be the greatest thing. But what's really important to remember here, like I said, your psyche is half the battle. And the things that we tell ourselves, we oftentimes, they become true. And so if you are constantly telling yourself, I just need to get a job, I just need to get a job, let's work on reframing that, right? So the success that you have with this process should not necessarily be getting a job, although that is the ultimate goal. So thinking rather about what can you focus on today or this week to feel successful in this process? Because getting a job is made up of a bunch of baby steps, a lot of faith, and being, and some luck in there. Of course, you all are talented. You have lots of skills and abilities, and that will speak for itself through your applications and the way that you talk about yourself. But sometimes getting a job in the job search process is, the stars are aligning and it's the right place, right time, right? So what can you do in terms of baby steps today, this week, to feel really successful? Maybe that is reaching out to 3 new contacts, asking maybe a couple folks that you already know for introductions to new people, so you can feel like you're making progress on your networking, right? Those are sort of little things you can do that can then, it's sort of like the snowball effect, right? It all rolls into one big snowball. It all helps you towards the end goal. When you're thinking about how you refresh this, LinkedIn. So I would recommend either updating your LinkedIn profile, it's been a while, or consider making one, highly consider making one. I talk to, a lot of people throughout my job, and some people that I talk to say, well, social media really isn't my thing. I'm just not sure how I would do with LinkedIn. So if that's you, if you identify with that, just humor me or humor yourself and try it out. Go explore it a little bit, see what it's about. I do have some past webinar recordings out there on the YouTube channel that are about, I think I have one on LinkedIn. And it is an incredibly useful tool. It is not just for job searching and applications, but finding new people. To me, that's the most important thing, because networking is really key to a job search and just your professional life in general. But LinkedIn gives you a lot of ways to find people that you would not have otherwise ever had the chance of meeting, especially nowadays when we can't go to large events. And so LinkedIn can be really helpful in doing that. So if you are not on LinkedIn, please just humor me a little bit. Go explore it and see what you think about it. I don't ever recommend that people create a LinkedIn if you know without a shadow of a doubt that you are just not going to keep it up, because the worst thing with LinkedIn is to have a stale profile. You can rest assured that a recruiter, probably at least 95% of the time, they're going to go to LinkedIn to try to find you because they just want to see more information about you. And recruiters do a lot of scouting candidates and recruiting on LinkedIn. So it's a tool that's out there and being used frequently. Another thing that you can do to sort of refresh yourself or feel like you've got some new energy into your job search is taking a look at maybe some quick online learning opportunities to upskill yourself. Especially early on in the pandemic, excuse me, many companies that had previously offered a lot of really good quality online learning opportunities, such as Coursera, LinkedIn Learning, which LinkedIn Learning, that is a feature of premium LinkedIn, but it's a really helpful tool. So if you look at some of those, and those are the only ones that come to mind right now, but there are a lot others out there, maybe you could brush up on some Excel skills, or if there are any, maybe Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop or anything that's maybe specific to your industry. Excuse me. Taking an opportunity to develop a really quick maybe certification or skill and something that you can put on your resume and talk about in an interview, that, even though you're in the middle of a job search, you took this opportunity to learn something new for yourself. And believe me when I say that that goes really far in the mind of a hiring manager. That shows enthusiasm and excitement. And the last thing I have here is joining professional development organizations. So these are really great, especially if you are a current student, no matter if you're a currently enrolled student. With professional development organizations, you can get really cheap memberships, and I'm talking like $20 to $30 a year. And that gives you full member access, which is quite the bargain, because normally professional development organization memberships are anywhere from, on the cheapest end, like $100 a year and up to several $100s. The benefit of joining these, and you would want to look for professional development orgs that are in line with your industry. So for example, with what I do for work, we have an organization, it's a state one, called VACE, Virginia Association of Colleges and Employers, and it's comprised of a lot of people that do the work that I do. The advantage to joining these organizations, especially at the student rate that you might be able to get it at, you get access to, a lot of them have job posting boards, so that gives you job listings that are specific to what you're interested in. Several of them, one of the ones that I'm involved in right now, they have a mentor program. Key, right? So if you're thinking about how do you develop networking contacts, what about a mentor program where somebody within that professional development org matches you with an experienced professional that can help guide you and answer your questions? They're there at your disposal. You know, you can ask them anything that you want to know, and there's going to be no judgment there. Mentor program was really helpful for me when I was first starting out in my industry. You get access to a lot of other really great stuff. Oftentimes they will do professional development opportunities. So you have the chance to stay up to date with industry knowledge about what's going on, which is very helpful when you're in the job search and interview mode. And, you know, you might get questions about, you know, what's going on with our industry, tell me what you know, or if you don't. It's also just really helpful to share that industry knowledge that you get, so you know, so you definitely look like, and you know that you know what's going on. So there are a lot of key points to joining professional development organizations, so I recommend that you do that. And I do see we have some questions, so thank you. So I will take a moment before my next slide and answer some of these. So somebody asked, are there links or resources you can specifically provide quick opportunities to upskill? Absolutely. I'm going to make a note for myself, so I will put that in my follow-up email to you all, because I always do that. And I'll try to I cannot multitask, guys, so I can't write and talk at the same time. But I will certainly look at some other opportunities besides Coursera. Coursera is a big one. I know Coursera was also, and other big ones too, they were offering, I think, free courses for students, for current students. So if you're a currently enrolled student in any institution, I think that you get some stuff for free from Coursera, and some other ones too, so I'll look that up. Somebody asked earlier, what would you consider a small goal? I don't want to set myself up for failure. That's a great question. So small goals, and I think actually my next slide we talk about specifics. So I'll talk a little bit more about this in just a minute, but really what's important for a small goal would be to get specific with it, in the sense that, you know, instead of saying, I want to redo my resume, which when I look at that on a checklist item of things to do, that gives me anxiety, because I think, oh my, I have to recreate this, or I have to overhaul my resume, and that just feels like way too much to do, and then I don't end up doing it. So on the opposite side of that, what you could do for a small goal would be, okay, I want to rewrite, or I want to revisit this particular section of my resume. Or maybe I want to send my resume to a close networking contact to see if they have any thoughts or opinions on it. So that would be a smaller goal. You know, or maybe you would want to increase your networking contacts by 5 new people in the next month. right? And then you can break that down about week by week and how you want to pursue that. So I hope that was helpful. Let me see. Okay, so somebody asked, I'll do this last question and then we'll move on and I'll get to the others in just a little bit. Somebody asked, I've been using LinkedIn a lot for networking, recent graduate, having trouble finding people who are able to offer helpful connections. Okay. Any tips on networking and find people who might be actually carry the weight in the hiring process? Okay, so I certainly understand. You know, I think some of that might be due to just those particular people that you're reaching out to. Maybe they don't feel like they have resources or other people to help you. In my experience, the vast majority of people only want good. So if you're reaching out and asking them for help, they really do want to help you, but maybe some people just aren't sure exactly what you need particularly, or they aren't sure, they know what you need, but they're just not sure that they have it right now. But in terms of finding people who can carry weight in the hiring process, again, if you want to reach out to me specifically, happy to talk about your individual situation. But I would say if you're looking at targeting certain companies, maybe you have an application into a company, or you know you're very interested in it, it's sort of it's on your target list. Using LinkedIn to find contacts, perhaps in the department of that the department within that organization that you want to work in, or just contacts that are a little bit more specific within that organization. Seeing if you have any mutual connections and seeing if you can get an introduction that way. But that's what I would say in terms of carrying weight in the hiring process. A lot of companies have the internal referral program where they get incentivized for referring people to job applications. And if they're a successful hire, so if you were to be interviewed and you accept the job, they would get some kind of incentive, and usually it's a monetary kickback. So we can talk one-on-one definitely, but I would say targeting contacts to find within that specific organization, and if you can, within the department or area in which you want to work, would be most helpful for that. Okay, so I'm going to move on, but those are great questions, and I see that we have 2 more in there, and we will get to them in just a little bit. So for my last slide, rounding stuff out today, I wanted to talk about staying motivated. It was definitely one of the hardest parts about the job search when I went through it. And this was not my first one. I also had a very active job search when I graduated from my graduate program. But it was, as always, a little bit different. I had different life circumstances this time. But staying motivated is a difficult thing. What I will say looking back, in hindsight's always 20/20, but what I will say looking back on my job search was the motivation sort of, sometimes it waxed and waned. And the hardest part about that for me was telling myself that that was okay, right? I thought that I had to stay motivated 24/7, every day, every week, every month, right? And sometimes that's going to come and go. But knowing that that is okay, that is all part of the process in this, and that is a completely and absolutely normal reaction to have, as long as you are not demotivated for, a couple weeks or more than that, right? Maybe you need to take a step back, and that's perfectly fine. But some tips, some specific things to try to stay motivated with your job search. Like I was talking about just a moment ago, getting really specific with your to-do list. So when you sit down to set the weekly goals for yourself, instead of saying things like, my goal is to network this week. Well, that's really nebulous, and that could mean a lot of different things. And like I said, when I look at that, that gives me anxiety, because I think, okay, that there's so many ways in which I can do that. Where do I start? So to avoid those feelings, be a little bit more specific about it. So maybe you say, I want to reach out to 2 new contacts this week. Maybe you want to send 5 new connection requests on LinkedIn to try to get an informational interview with somebody. That's how you can be specific with that and still stay motivated and excited about those things that you have to do. Writing down your goals. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but this was really, really, really important for me when I was staying motivated, because normally it was just me and my computer screen, and there was nothing, right? There's nothing else there. And especially if, like for my particular situation, my spouse was at work, and so it was just myself and the dog in the house. And as much as we wish things for our animals, they're not really that talkative. So I was very lonely. And so writing down my goals was a really good way to keep myself motivated. I would have them posted on the wall in my workspace. So they were right there where I could see them, tape them to your monitor or your laptop or something like that. Think about what is really motivating to you. Are you a person who loves a really good motivational quote? Print that out and put it somewhere where you can see it often. Those are little things that when you're having kind of a down day or maybe a down moment, you can look at and really remind yourself of, okay, this is what I'm after and this is my goal. So let's get back on track. Reminding yourself to take time off. I remember when I decided that there were some days where I just did not feel like working on my job search stuff. I felt really guilty about it. And that was not a good feeling. I did not like that. But reminding yourself that it is okay to disconnect and feel good about that decision for yourself. Every once in a while, every couple weeks or, a week or whatever, take a day off and just sort of, do something off of the computer screen and totally unrelated to your job search. The joke in my household was that when I started my job search, I'm the queen of unfinished projects. So I had about 4 unfinished projects in the garage, and my husband sort of looked at me and said, "So you're going to go ahead and get those done now, aren't you?" So we could free up space. And so that was actually a really good distraction and opportunity for me to step away from the computer screen, do something hands-on and something where I could get an immediate result. And I think that's really important too in the job search, because a job search, you oftentimes don't get immediate results. You're waiting, right? You're waiting for that phone call, or you're waiting for the next interview. And that's enough to drive anybody crazy. So taking a step back, doing something tangible, hands-on, maybe if you like to cook, making a fun recipe that you love, or trying something new out, something where you can get immediate results. That's really good for the psyche. And the last thing here, just knowing that giving yourself grace that you will stumble, and that's perfectly okay. I am not afraid to admit that I have addressed more than one cover letter to the wrong person and organization, and that's okay. Certainly did not get an interview from that, but you know what? Things happen. But just make sure that you're staying on top of things so that it doesn't happen again. But you will stumble, and that is perfectly okay. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that, after interviews, for example, say, I don't think I answered any question in that interview right. I really don't know how they felt about me in that interview. And then they get moved on to the next round. We are always our own worst critics, present company included. And, just knowing that you will stumble. Sometimes you will feel like you totally bombed something, and that's okay. What really matters there is how you react and pick yourself up in that situation. So that is all the content that I have for you today. I have a couple questions here that I'm going to go ahead and answer. But if you all are thinking of any other questions, if you have them on your mind, please throw them in that Q&A. So we had somebody ask along the lines of companies that are changing their hiring procedures. How would you recommend approaching a situation where you don't hear back from an application after professionally following up a couple times? Oh yeah, all the time. So, you've done your due diligence, you followed up very professionally, you did not bug them, but you still have not heard back from an application. Part of this would depend on maybe where you are in the interview process. if you know that you're in the final rounds, or perhaps you've had a couple interviews already, and so you're a little bit knee deep in that hiring process, give them a little bit of time. I would say probably a few more weeks, and follow back up. And then if you don't hear anything from them at that point, then unfortunately you might just need to let that one go and move on. With hiring processes, sometimes what happens, or oftentimes what happens, is a good hiring manager and recruiter, as they are interviewing candidates, they will not tell other candidates if they've moved on or not until they have an accepted decision from their final candidate. So if that makes sense. So because really the whole point of it, they don't want to really close off all of their options, because what happens probably more often than one might imagine is that people get offered jobs and they turn them down. I've done that before. Because maybe they get to the end of the process and they think this actually is just really not a good fit for me. They found out more information. So from a recruiting manager, or a hiring manager's perspective, they're not going to want to let those other candidates know the end result until they have their final candidate sign on the dotted line. So if you're feeling like I haven't heard anything for a long time, maybe that's what's going on with them in their process. But if it's early on in the hiring process and you followed a couple of times and you haven't heard anything from them, you might just need to put that in the we'll wait on this category. And again, in a few weeks, come back to it and see, have they had any change in their process? But that's it's a frustrating and tricky thing. And I'm sorry, I know I've totally been there before. So we had another question here. We have a few more, which is great. What is your opinion on adding why I'm passionate about the organization in my cover letter, in addition to why I'm a qualified candidate? My opinion is I think you should. Most certainly, I think that's a really important part of any cover letter, is not just to say, here's why I'm a great fit for you. Of course, that's very important. They need to understand your qualifications. But they also need to understand why you would be excited about that role and working for that company. No hiring manager is going to want to hire somebody who just feels okay about that. Maybe I'm applying to this job just because it's one of many that I'm applying for, which is probably the case, right? But show them your enthusiasm, because no hiring manager wants to have employees that feel sort of like mediocre, like meh about their job. So let them know why you would be really excited about that. I have a great cover letter guide that I can also send out to you all. That would help address some of those things. And I'm going to make a note for myself to do that. We have one here. I'm an alum, curious about jobs outside my region. I'm guessing you mean geographical region. Discussing relocation with employers. So relocation, some organizations, a fair amount of them, do offer relocation benefits for candidates that they make a successful hire on. That is part of a benefits package. And so benefits generally really are not, we don't recommend discussing them up front in that interview process. It might come up given, especially if you have your current address on your resume and cover letter and you're applying for jobs outside of that area, it might come up early in the process. They could bring it up for you so that you could discuss it then. But oftentimes companies will have like I said, part of their benefits package, a relocation benefits, and that looks different for every company. But usually that results in them covering part or a lot of the moving costs associated with that relocation. So, whatever you deem necessary for that. So if that would be a moving truck or whatnot. But again, I wouldn't recommend early on in the process you bringing that up and saying, hey, do you guys have relocation benefits? Because that is a little bit presumptive. And like I said, a good hiring manager or recruiter will bring that up early on in the process with you, because they should see where you're located and be able to ascertain that you would need to move for that, especially if they're expecting you to be in the office some or part of that. So I hope that was helpful in answering that question. Let's see, when should a college senior seriously begin looking for jobs? Are we already behind if we haven't yet? No, I'm sorry, you're not behind. You know, I think especially in this recession time, and I don't mean to giggle, but I have worked with undergrad students for a long time, and that is a question that I got all the time. So there are many of you all that are thinking, I feel like I'm behind, but you're not. Especially in the recession that we're in, with companies still not entirely sure what's going on with their hiring ability, you're not behind. And there are probably jobs that are going to be coming up in the next 6 months or so that are not available now, because they maybe don't know that they can hire for them. They don't know that they need them. So you are absolutely not behind by any means. And usually there are certain industries that do that, and they're very few and far between. Like accounting is one that they usually start their hiring and their recruiting processes in the fall semester, but the vast majority of industries and organizations recruit in the spring semester. So you're absolutely not behind. Last question, unless anybody else has anything that's burning on their mind, they can place it there in the Q&A. Good places to begin looking for job postings, specific websites or forums that you recommend. So yeah, for online stuff, some of the, I mean, you can sort of think about that in a couple ways, right? You can certainly look at places that are sort of large, like Indeed.com. Definitely not a bad bet. With Indeed, it's nice because you can set up search criteria for yourself. You can set up job alerts, and so you don't have to go in there, whenever you go on Indeed and just type in your keywords and search through all of the listings. You can have that sort of done for you. Most of the job search sites nowadays do have an automated process like that can pull jobs that are related to things you tell it you want. So Indeed's always a good one. It's been around for a long time. They have a really good process down. LinkedIn is a really good place to look as well, especially because so many recruiters are already on LinkedIn, and using that to scout candidates and to reach out to potentials. So I would definitely try that one. Those are the two big ones. I mean, there's a lot, like ZipRecruiter is out there. I haven't heard a lot of people that use ZipRecruiter, but that doesn't mean it's not widely used. But then, like I was talking about earlier with the professional development organizations, reaching out to those organizations and trying to get on board with them, ones that are specific to your industry. So you can think about looking for job postings at like maybe the general sites like Indeed and LinkedIn that have everything, or you can look at ones that are specific to your industry. And oftentimes that's just, finding just a simple Google search, job boards for marketing or something like that, whatever it is that you're looking for. So I would recommend sort of using both. When I was in a job search, I used both sort of with each other. There were definitely some ones that were specific to what I did that were very helpful, and then other more general higher ed ones were also very helpful. So I hope that answered your question. And that's all the questions that I see for now, which is great. I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Like I said, I'm gonna slide over here to the next one. There's my contact information. So feel free to reach out via an email. If you do want to call my number, that is forwarded to my home number, so I will get that picked up. I mean, you can always visit us on the web, careerservices.richmond.edu. If you would like to schedule an appointment, like I said, that information would be on Spider Connect, and that you can see all of our availability on there, and you can schedule at your leisure. If you are a graduate or somebody within the UR community that has no idea what Spider Connect is, let me know, and I will get you hooked up with that. But in the meantime, we check out our calendar of events for the other things that we have coming up. We have some really wonderful programming for students and alumni alike. Yeah, keep an eye out for all that stuff. And like I said, next week, I've got the networking webinar. So I'm going to be talking about networking in a virtual world. I will be talking a little bit about LinkedIn, but it will be about other sort of virtual networking etiquette as well to help you feel more comfortable with that. So with that being said, again, I really appreciate you guys hanging in there with me today. Appreciate your great questions, and hope that you all take care out there and be good to yourselves. Thanks.